I'm Taylor Ward.
I'm Hope Steffes.
I'm Sam Barron.
I'm Cameron Hunter.
I'm Tom Hader.
And I'm Keelan McBride. Um, so, starting out, first of all, our topic for this panel kind of discussion that we have going on is the impact of privilege and oppression on crime in the social justice system. So I first wanted to start out kind of like with the story that I'm sure a lot of you, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard already. So on April 12, 2015, Freddie Gray, 25-year-old black American man, was arrested by the Baltimore Police Department for possessing what police alleged was an illegal switchblade. So while he was being transported in a police van, Gray fell into a coma and was taken to a trauma center. Gray later died on April 19, 2015. His death was ascribed to injuries to his spinal cord. So on April 21st, further investigation took place, and it ended up being that 6 Baltimore police officers were suspended with pay for about 6 months while the investigation was taking place, and they eventually found that his death was caused by injuries that the police officers did to him. So I think that's just super important to understand that throughout this talk that we're going to have, understanding the importance of like how race and plays into the criminal justice system. So like people that are minorities and just basically minority populations are affected by the criminal justice system on a higher level than like the majority populations. So the importance of this issue is just understanding that a person's race has a lot to do with how they're treated in the social justice system. So understanding that when a white person and a black person commit the same crime, the black person is going to get the worst sentence and is going to have get looked down upon more than its like white counterpart, than their white counterpart. The topic again is just talking about how the criminal justice system affects and impacts basically minority groups, because yes, it does impact white people, but minority groups is the big issue that we're going to talk about today. So yeah, we have a number of people that are going to talk about some things now.
So what is internalized oppression? It's when people are targeted, discriminated against, or oppressed over a period of time. They often internalize kind of about their self-image and how people view themselves, the myth of misinformation society communicates about them and the group they are related to.
Yeah, so like an example of this and how it plays into like the criminal justice system is basically when someone of a minority group is constantly like targeted or followed or questioned by police just because of like their race or their ethnicity or something like that, eventually over time they're going to start to believe that they are the stereotypes that police officers and the criminal justice system and basically just society puts them into. So like obviously over a long period of time, people are going to internalize those things about them. So let's say someone gets stopped, a black man gets stopped on the street because he's wearing a hood or something, and the police officer's like, oh, you must be doing something wrong. Eventually he's going to be, every time he's walking down the street, he's going to be like, oh, I wonder if someone's going to think I'm doing something wrong just because I'm black and because I have a hood on. So that's an example of internalized oppression.
Interpersonal oppression is basically the idea that one group is better than another and has the right to control another. So there's interpersonal racism when one group goes, or what one group does to another group, so like racist jokes, stereotypes, harassment, or there's interpersonal sexism, so sexual abuse and harassment, sexist jokes, stuff like that.
So then like an example of this would be kind of like I mentioned before, like the stereotypes that people have on other races and ethnicities, and like a lot of those lead into the criminal justice system, because who are the people who are getting pulled over by cops? Who are the people that are like in jail and stuff like that? And then and another way that like interpersonal oppression plays into things is that like one group kind of thinks they're better than another group. So like in this case and what we're talking about is the police officers are the ones that have the authority, and the other people, like civilians, like the rest of us, are just like normal people. So then the fact that someone has power over another group, the people in power, so in this case the police officers in the criminal justice system, are can basically say and do whatever they want to the citizens, I guess, because of like their power and their status, and everyone kind of just has to be okay with that because that's like the way our social system is set up.
So, institutional oppression is the systematic mistreatment of people within a social identity group. These institutions support it and they're enforced by society. And it's based on a person's membership to a social identity group.
Going off of that is structural oppression, and it's basically like institutional oppression, and this occurs when established laws, customs, and practices systematically reflect and produce inequalities based on one's membership in targeted social identity groups.
Okay, so like an example of this is basically like an entire population of people ends up getting a certain stereotype or something put upon them based off of like their group. So then now all of a sudden, obviously black people are a minority, and I just keep using that as an example because it's the easiest one to go to. And black people are constantly like being watched and stuff by the police and stuff. So then that entire group, like all black people are in this group of like institutional oppression because like that's just like their norm now because that's what society has like put upon them, kind of thing, if that makes sense. Yeah, so those are just some examples of the different types of oppression, and we kind of discussed what they look like at each level. So then now we're going to talk about some research on oppression in the criminal justice system.
Okay, I guess a classic example of like what would be evident oppression in the criminal justice system is white versus black America getting time for nonviolent drug crimes. There was a Huffington Post article that quoted, I think it was a Pew Research article, on how white America, when it comes to illegal drug use, white America does the crime, but black America gets the time. Meaning that drug use with white and black Americans is generally either the same or slightly weighted towards white Americans, but black Americans are overwhelmingly incarcerated for the same crime, whereas white people generally just get a slap on the wrist, you know, whether it be dealing or just possession charges in general. And then in terms of things like police violence in a lot of these places like Ferguson, Missouri, and it was the Freddie Gray thing in Baltimore and stuff like that. Baltimore PD is relatively large, but in most of the cases where you've got people being harassed and or killed by police in freak accidents and things like that, they're generally low, or they're small police departments of 50 officers or less, as compared to like NYPD, which has I think over 1,000, and it's very well funded. A lot of these small departments lack the resources and training a lot of times, but end up having like military style gear, like assault weapons and body armor, things like that, and they're just very undertrained for the job that they have a lot of times. So there was actually a White House investigation after the Ferguson incident back. I think that was over. I can't remember. But anyway, Ferguson is a relatively small police department, and so there was actual evidence. There was actual evidence that the police department was racially profiling and things like that. So the panel actually said that it was not surprising that something like this happened there. Another example is a small police department in Damascus, Virginia, which has, I think, 4 active full-time officers. They've had several turnovers with police chiefs, whether it be corruption or a lack of patience for the system that or the hand they've been dealt in the system. A lot of times dealing with the fact that their police department is heavily underfunded. They've had a hard time finding actual officer candidates because you can basically make more money working at a McDonald's there, which is not okay at all. And another good example would be actually in my hometown. The city council, or actually it was more the county, decided that they were going to take their sheriff's officers off of protected status for if they were injured on the job, that they would be compensated for any medical type things caused at work. And after that happened, the turnover rate and people applying for jobs there dropped substantially, because why would you go work someplace that has, you could be potentially hurt very badly or killed and not have that coverage for yourself or your family in case you do get injured or killed. So it's a lot of times budget cuts sound like they might be saving money, but in the long run it costs more because you have a higher turnover rate, you have to keep training people, and oftentimes those people aren't trained well enough because they haven't worked the job long enough, and then they leave, and it's a constant cycle of turnover. So that's actually a thing in a lot of police departments and county offices throughout the United States, and it's a very big problem. Another good example, actually from the police department in my hometown, is they began a campaign a couple years ago trying to become more like one with the community as opposed to like an opposition force in the community, I guess. They've been doing a lot more outreach type stuff, and they even do a thing called Jason's Presence, which is like a shop with a cop type thing. It's for families in need. During Christmas time, their kids can, get presents and things like that. And there's a lot of donations that go into it and everything. And that's kind of all part of building the trust and building a relationship with the community again. And that's been fairly successful as well. So programs like that are always really useful. And in this article on USA Today, again with the Damascus Police Department, they've been talking a lot about that as well, going out into the community and actually being a part of the community rather than, being that like opposition force that's kind of always watching everyone sort of. Going out and actually talking to people, meeting people, just walking the streets, getting to know everyone and being friendly, to kind of break down that barrier so that people don't feel like they're being watched and oppressed, rather that they're just another part of the community, but they're there to enforce the law and things like that. So I thought that was, I think things like that are very helpful.
Yeah.
And people and departments have been seeing results with that, having a lot less standoff type situations with people, and yeah.
Yeah, those are some good solutions, for sure. So basically, yeah, we did a lot of research on this topic, and how privilege and oppression impact minority groups. Basically, it was like our main focus throughout this because it's obviously like a big problem in the U.S. today. So, okay, so one thing we forgot to talk about almost. It are the 5 faces of oppression. So the first is exploitation. So in a lot of cases, minority groups are exploited by the criminal justice system because they a lot of minority groups are in poverty. So like they can't afford a lawyer when it comes time to like go to a court session where it's like a black person's word against like a white person's word kind of thing. And then the next is marginalization. So minority populations are obviously already marginalized. So then when you add someone of power that's able to like control them or like to have the power over another person, then like that adds to the person being marginalized and oppressed. And then powerlessness, again, that kind of goes back to like, I'm gonna use the example of black people again, because like if a black person were to try to stand up for themselves and to a police officer like they do in like non-violent ways and just like use their voices, they're like taken down and attacked because like what they're doing is not right or whatever. So basically they can't do anything to support or to like try to make their situations better because of because of their like the power stance between people. And then there is cultural imperialism, like that goes back to like I think again like kind of like the power structure thing, where one culture is kind of dominant over another culture, or like one race is dominant over another race, and then that leads to issues in like with police and in the criminal justice system. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Good. Okay, and then lastly is violence. Minority groups are way more likely to have like violence done against them by police, and like violence in a non-physical way by like criminal justice systems than like any white people or anything like that. So yeah, those are kind of the 5 faces of oppression that we wanted to just touch on a little bit. So yeah, that was basically our presentation, our talk to you. We have all these nice, beautiful people. Yeah, so we just want you all to understand the importance of like the relationship between privilege and oppression, and how that like affects the criminal justice system and affects how people are viewed in the criminal justice system and viewed by police and stuff like that. So that's it.
Boxing class, know how we doing it, we been chopped and screwing it. Coming to get that #1 spot you got like Ludacris. We don't be acting groupie-ish, taking a sip out Ludacris. We buy our own bottles, grab one and put it to your lip. Hating on your hood, throw your hood up, put it in his face. Reppin' Texas, got that real estate down in the real estate. Didn't need a bigger place, didn't need a bigger face. On my watch, but forgot and went and got them both replaced. Fix your face.